EA, the Camp Fish Factor, stood for enthusiasm and appreciation. Now those are pretty big words for a 8 or 9-year-old kid, and that's when, you know, a guy like Schloneker perhaps, to give it some context, would start talking about brilliant rainbows and pretty white lily pad flowers and soaring bald eagles. And in other words, he needed to find some way to salvage a guide trip because he couldn't catch any fish. But when I think about EA, I think about the enthusiasm that the staff had for fishing. And the greatest proof of that is when we had a day off, we went fishing. And for many of us, you know, that meant a trip to Canada. So let me pause for a little bit of a sidebar. Craven, no doubt, chose me as one of the people to give this talk because he thought I would keep things tasteful. And Dan, I'm afraid you were mistaken. So, we're headed to Canada, and it's Chris Golden, Kyle, in the red shirt, Craven, and myself. And we're going up to the Indian chain. We're fishing one of the clearer lakes in the chain, and Dan says, I have to go number 2. Now, he didn't use those exact words, but you know what I mean. So Dan, not wanting to lose any fishing time and not wanting to go to shore and get eaten by bugs, Dan walks to the back of the boat and begins to undress. And pretty soon there he is, this big white whale, naked in the back of the boat, and he jumps in the water to do his business. Now, I've got to keep one eye on Dan.
Connor, none of this is true.
I've got to keep one eye on Dan, and not because I'm afraid he's going to drown, but you see, Dan, and not because I'm a weirdo, though people may disagree, but Dan's got a reputation for cleaning up, I'll put it in quotes, cleaning up with like an old towel. And if you weren't careful, Dan would take that towel and he'd hit you in the back with it from the water, just because he's kind of sick.
Yes, he is.
So I'm keeping one eye on Dan, and I'm keeping one eye on my suet, and unbelievably, I have not just a follow, but I've got a double follow. And two nice fish, like a 36 and a 42-inch fish. And they're pretty hot, and they're coming. And I lean down, and I begin figure eighting. While Dan's hanging onto the side of the boat, just 8 feet away, probably, 8 feet away. I no sooner complete one figure eight, and of course Dan is a little nervous. He starts screaming like a little girl, and he's splashing on his side of the boat trying to scare the fish. And I think, you know, think about this from the fish's perspective. The muskies are coming up. They see a 9-inch suet going around, and then they look over here, and Wasowski. Say it. Say the word. What's written there?
Oh. Creek chub minnow.
So maybe they see a creek chub minnow. Charlie?
Or a little George.
Or Lynette.
Lazy Ike.
Okay, so when you add F plus L plus P plus EA, you get total success, which around camp could mean thick skin, because you need a thick skin to exist at Camp Fish. And I'm not going to single out any former Camp Fish staffer and label him or her as a total success. That'd be way too big of a burden for anybody to bear. But I can say this, and this was really true today with the fishing that we had on the Camp Fish Lakes. When you look at the Camp Fish model, located on those fish-filled lakes, and during that time period, much of which there was no public access even on Long and May, and then with Al and Ron Linder behind it and the power and influence that they had, that in my mind was a total success. Camp Fish. So, thank you, and I've got one gift for Craven. And he can share it or not. That's up to Dan. Thank you.
Poor judgment on my part. There was a Camp Fish language, wasn't there? Dolly, Pimple Point. All different places there on Long or May Lake. So we speak a different language, and pretty cool. And it went all the way from way back when Al was there to when folks in the middle and the folks at the end there. And Rob Kim is the next person to have a little chat here with us. And Rob has written several books. He works at Medtronic currently, lives in St. Paul, and was editor of Esox Angler for about 8 years, and a very good friend of mine. So Rob, here we go.
Thank you. I'm not nearly as clever as Dave, so, but I'll try. When I was informed that I had volunteered to do this, and that is how it worked. Dan put volunteer in quotation marks when told me I was doing this. I kind of struggled because what in the world do you say? And how do you sum up something like this? And the obvious answer is don't try, because you can't. But I started to think of some of the things, my entire experience as a Camp Fish camper and then as a staff member, and then what's gone on since then, the people I've kept in touch with and the people I've reconnected with here this weekend. And it's the whole thing is remarkable. If you told somebody the entire story of Camp Fish, you dragged somebody off the street and told them the story of the people and the experiences and the places, who's going to believe you when this when this whole story is told? It's almost impossible to fathom each of the experiences that we all had, put them all together, and to have them as many stories as we have in this room is pretty remarkable. I first heard of Camp Fish when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. I grew up on a dairy farm, and when I was pretty young, my mom went back to work, and my dad didn't have time to keep a little kid from killing himself and farm at the same time. So I got shipped off with my grandparents. My grandfather was a college professor, and during the summer he fished. Lake Cabin, not far from where I grew up, and he's the one who taught me how to fish. And he lived in Moorhead, Minnesota, right down the street from the Moorhead Public Library. And I discovered I would take a bicycle down there, and I found out that they would let me check out In Fisherman magazine. And they would let me check out 3 at a time. And that when I made this discovery, and the 3 at a time thing lasted for about a week. And to get the magazines, the lady that worked, this cranky old lady that worked at the counter at the library would have to go down to the back of the room and take them out of the boxes. The three issue thing went out the window, and they let me just take as many as I could carry. And I would take them home and read them and bring them back and get more. And I would, if I had checked them out already, I didn't care. She just brought a stack, and I would bring a stack back. And somewhere in there, I never saw it. I don't remember seeing it. Somewhere in there was either a story or an ad about Camp Fish. And my grandpa saw this and then told my parents that for my birthday, they were going to send me to Camp Fish. And I wasn't supposed to know about this, but I happened to be in the other room. I wasn't listening in, but I happened to hear that they're sending me to Camp Fish. So I had to go for 2 months pretending that I didn't know about this. And my dad would come down the basement and say, "Rob, you know, it's the middle of winter. Rob, why are you messing around with your fishing tackle? What are you, no reason, you know." And then I finally got to act surprised on my birthday, which was in March.